California. California. So one of the ways that you can utilize local power is through ballot measures. Now, there are a number of states that are going to have ballot measures on the ballot this November. So even if you don't want to vote for the president, if you live in one of these states, you should probably go vote for these ballot measures because you will be affected. California is one of those states that is a little bit easier to pass a ballot measure. Unlike my state, they have direct initiative. My state has indirect initiative. Right? So it's a little bit easier. And this is also why California tends to have a lot of ballot measures. We're going to start with the intro and we'll cover the first one tonight. And then the rest of the week, we'll be going through California because they do have a lot of them. Sorries. Okay. How does it work in California? Again, like I said, in California, it's a little bit easier than other places because citizens can initiate legislation and amendments through direct initiative. That means a successful petition can bypass the California legislature and go directly on the ballot for voters to vote on, which is pretty cool. In California, they may initiate legislation either as a state statute or a constitutional amendment. They also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. And the California state legislature, which is getting a lot of heat since the whole reparations bill, they, like the other 49 states, may place their own measures on the ballot as legislatively referred constitutional amendments, but also, unlike most states, place legislatively referred state statutes on the ballot to allow voters to participate in approving their laws the legislator wishes to pass as well. Referred amendments require 66% by both chambers before going to the voters for ratification. Like a lot of other states, they also have this single subject rule. In California, each proposed measure must address only one subject. So you can't have multiple subjects addressed on one measure here. We're going to fast forward here to the first measure. And you guys can always look at this separately if you want to see about the deadlines and stuff like that. But the point that Roger noted here, only 6 months to collect signatures for laws and amendments and 3 months for repealers for such a large state, while Arizona gets 2 years. This is another thing you're going to notice how these states are so different when it comes to these measures. Some states have longer time to collect, some have a short time. This part here is interesting. Alteration. The California state legislature may not amend or repeal an approved measure without submitting the change to voters. However, a ballot measure may include a clause waiving this protection either entirely or conditionally. Once ballot initiatives have been declared eligible for the ballot, they are submitted to the legislature. The legislature has no control over whether the initiatives appear on the ballot. However, California law requires the legislature to hold a public hearing on the initiatives at least 30 days prior to the election. If you live in California, how many of you knew that? How many of you knew that they're required by law to hold a public hearing about the ballot measures 30 days prior to the election? Makes you wonder. Okay. Oh, whoops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry about that. Okay, let's go on. Proponents are allowed to withdraw an initiative even after it has been declared eligible for ballot up to when the initiative is certified as qualified for the ballot 131 days before the election. Now, this means that the legislator, they can offer alternative legislation as a compromise in an effort to convince petitioners to withdraw certified initiatives. A little note here from Roger, which I think is important. Don't trust the government. Don't let them convince you to withdraw your initiative. I imagine situations where me saying, oh, I see after session of asking you to do this and you're ignoring it. Now you want to come through in the final hour when you see we're about to pass it and take credit for passing it after we did the work. No, that's okay. We're not withdrawing it, but that's me though. Good point there, Roger. So let's go ahead and get to the first one. We'll come back to that one last. That was one that passed in March. So we'll get to the first ballot measure that will be on the ballot in California in November. Okay. I don't know why that one is so long. Here we go. What has qualified to be on the ballot this November? Proposition 2, Public Education Facilities Bond Measure. A yes vote supports issuing $10 billion in bonds to fund construction and modernization of public education facilities. Here's the measure design here. Click on the arrows for summaries of the different provisions of California Proposition 2. It says funds for school districts, etc. I don't think that works though. Sorry about that, guys. Support. Yes on Proposition 2, Coalition for Adequate School Housing Issues Committee, and yes on Proposition 2, Community College Facility Coalition Issues Committee are leading the campaign in support of Proposition 2. So again, that is a public education facilities bond measure. Here's who's supporting this. Some of the unions include, of course, California Federation of Teachers, California Labor Federation, to name a few. Organizations, the Association of California School Administrators. You can also mention, I think this was interesting as well, California Retired Teachers Association. Here's one of the arguments for it. The bottom line is any school bond that we place on the ballot is not going to cover the enormous needs of our K through 12 schools and community college, but this money will help address the most urgent needs. I am hopeful and optimistic that California voters will recognize that this is a good deal. That's coming from State Assembly Al Marasucci. And there's no opposition to that one so far. So as long as that remains and there's not big money interests spent to defeat it, that will probably most likely pass. But again, it's up to the voters to come out and vote for that. Proposition 3, the Right to Marry and Repeal Amendment. What is this all about? This is on the ballot this November. A yes vote supports this constitutional amendment to repeal Proposition 8, which defined marriage as a union between one man and one woman, and declare that a right to marry is a fundamental right in the California Constitution. Interesting. Okay, so who is supporting this? Gavin Newsom, Scott Wiener, Evan Lowe. Here's one of the arguments. California is ready for love, and these protections will protect against any future attempt to restrict marriage rights for same-sex and interracial couples. So notice this, guys. I want people to pay attention to this. This is not just to protect marriage as a right for same-sex couples, but also interracial couples. So they put this all together in one measure here. Who's against this? California Capital Connection, California Family Council, to name a few. And then one of the arguments here is marriage has been defined as a union between a man and a woman from the beginning. God instituted it. The debate about marriage is not about love or hate. It's about truth. Man cannot redefine what God has already defined. So the pushback I would give to that is that, again, it appears that this is not just addressing same-sex marriage, but it is also addressing interracial as well. So I'm not sure that argument would hold up. And then 2, that's based on your religious belief. If you believe in the Bible, then you can say that. If you don't believe in that, then, we have separation of church and state. So I don't think that's a good argument. When I was on the debate team, there were a couple things that we could not use to debate someone. We couldn't use religion. That was a big one. We couldn't use opinion. So I'm not sure that would hold up. And so far, there's been no campaign finance money to support or oppose that measure. California Proposition 4, Parks, Environment, Energy, and Water Bond Measure. A yes vote supports issuing $10 billion in bonds to fund state and local parks, environmental protection projects, water infrastructure projects, energy projects, and flood protection projects. Interesting. All right, I'm gonna stop saying that now. This is important. Proposition 4 would also require that 40% of the bond revenue be used to fund activities that benefit communities with lower income or that are affected by environmental changes or disasters. I think that's important to note. And it says, has California voters decided on bonds related to environment before? Between 1993 and 2024, California voters decided on 6 bond measures related to parks and the environment. It says 4 were approved and 2 were defeated. That's interesting. Who supports this? California Labor Federation and the IBEW Local 569. Organizations, Clean Water Act, of course, Environmental Defense Fund, and Natural Resources Defense Council. One of the arguments here, every Californian has felt the impact of climate crisis, whether it's wildfires, extreme heat, flooding, sea level rise. I feel like this will resonate with voters who want to protect themselves and their communities. Who's opposed to it? The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Now they're saying these bonds will be paid by people decades from now that didn't even get to vote for their authorization. So there is no campaign finance money spent to support or oppose it at this point in time. Proposition 5, lower supermajority requirement to 55% for local special taxes to fund housing and public infrastructure amendment. A yes vote supports lowering the vote threshold from 66.67% to 55% for local special taxes and bond measures to fund housing projects and public infrastructure. That is interesting. It says here, currently the local governments are authorized to enact a general tax for general government purposes via a simple majority vote for the electorate and special taxes for specific purposes via a 2/3 supermajority vote. Who supports this? California Democratic Party, the State Building and Construction Trades Council of California, organizations. This is interesting. AIDS Healthcare Foundation, the League of Women Voters of California, to name a few. Here's one of the arguments for it. ACA 1 will level the playing field and create parity between school districts and cities, counties, and special districts so that all local governments have a variable financing tool to address community needs. It also contains various transparency and accountability measures, including an expenditure plan of projects and programs, proposed audits, and monitoring by Citizens Commission to assure resources are being spent as proposed. Who opposes it? California Association of Realtors, California Chamber of Commerce, of course, a California Taxpayer Association, to name a few. And one of the arguments against it, I'm actually going to read this one here. ACA 1 would sharply lower Proposition 13's 2/3 voter threshold to 55% for local special taxes to fund infrastructure, so vaguely defined that virtually anything could qualify. It would open the door to massive new tax hikes to give Sacramento politicians what they want from property taxpayers without giving them their money's worth in return. Interesting. No money spent to support or oppose. This one is kind of wild. California Proposition number 6, remove involuntary servitude as punishment for crime amendment. A yes vote supports amending the state constitution to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime and authorize the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to award credits to incarcerated persons who voluntarily participate in work assignments. This kind of reminds me, and I'll have to ask Roger about this. This kind of reminds me of Kamala Harris when she was trying to keep prison labor. Let me go on. It says the amendment would repeal language prohibiting involuntary servitude except to punish crime and replace it with language prohibiting slavery and involuntary servitude absolutely. The amendment also would prohibit the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Whoops, I lost my spot. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from disciplining any incarcerated person for refusing a work assignment, but authorize the department to award credits to incarcerated persons who voluntarily participate in work assignments. Don't this remind you of when, yeah, Miranda, exactly. Kamala wanted to keep people in prison for the free labor. That's what this reminds me of. Ooh. Okay. Who supports it? Steve Bradford, Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Lori Wilson, California Labor Federation, the ACLU of California, and the Abolish Slavery National Network. Isn't this wild, guys? It's 2024. 2024. Here's one of the arguments. More than 94,000 Californians are currently enslaved in state prison. African Americans account for 28% of the prison population, despite making up less than 6% of California's overall population. Although no courts explicitly order forced labor as a part of criminal sentencing, it's standard practice to force incarcerated people to perform labor. Kamala Harris, anybody? Paige and Kamala. Paige and Kamala. She put a lot of those people there. It seems like now they're trying to undo what was done. I don't know. Like, yeah, Terry Hinton said modern day. That's what it reminds me of. Ooh. Okay. And there's a note here from Roger. Please click on the link and scroll all the way to the bottom where it shows the U.S. map to show you the states that have already ratified this into their state constitution. Let's see. I don't see a map, so I don't know. Oh, maybe I have this too large. Let me make it smaller because sometimes things disappear when you. Looks like they removed that, Roger. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't see that there. Here's the big one. We'll stop with this one and we'll continue California tomorrow night because California has a lot. Okay. California Proposition 32, $18 minimum wage initiative. This is a big one. A yes vote supports increasing the state minimum wage to $18 per hour by 2026 for all employers, and thereafter adjusting the rate annually by increases to the cost of living. Okay, guys, pay attention to this. This is significant because this last part here, increase the minimum wage to $18 an hour by 2026 for all employers. But then it goes on to say, after that, you are going to adjust the rate annually based on the cost of living. So I think we all know California is an expensive state, right? So that means we could be looking at California having a minimum wage of $20 an hour within the next couple of years. Which isn't much there. The cost of living report for 2024 shows you that you need to make at least, I think, $45 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom house in California, 2-bedroom rental. So, yeah. This says yes on California Living Wage Act, also known as the Working Hero Action for the Living Wage Act PAC, is leading the campaign in support of the ballot initiative. So that's who's leading it. It's supported by Assembly Member Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher. One of the arguments is An investor who filed the ballot initiative said the time is now because the pandemic has heightened the people's understanding of the realities so many Californians face. Cost of living is rising faster and faster, but wages haven't increased. Yeah, I think, well, let me read the opposition. John Kabatek said, market, not politicians and bureaucrats, are to be dictating the financial growth and success of working men and women in California. Let the market dictate this and stop sending the message that mediocrity is a pathway to professional success in California. Dude, that don't even make any sense. So here's the problem with California, right? People can't afford to buy a house in California. That didn't start during the pandemic. It's been that way for a while. I have a high school classmate who is a lawyer in Southern California, and she has to rent her house. She still can't afford to buy. That's what I'm trying to tell you, like, in a way. Now, $18 an hour, California cost of living report says it should be at least $45 an hour just to afford a 2-bedroom rental. This is how far behind we are, you guys. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If you look at the out of reach report, which I might have to bring that up again with these ballot measures, I'm telling you, you look at the out of reach report, we are way behind. The fact that our minimum wage has remained at like $7.25 an hour for all these years, that has really held us back. And now it's like these states have to play catch up. So California is now trying to play catch up. And I don't know if all the businesses will be able to do it. I don't know if like the mom and pop businesses will be able to pay everybody $18 an hour, but this wouldn't have been an issue if we weren't so far behind to begin with. JB says, Sabby, our ballot initiative had the same language when we raised it to $15 per hour by 2026 for Florida. So JB's in Florida, for people wondering. This is wow. So I hope you guys in California know what's up. Okay. And there has been campaign finance money spent for this one to support it, not to oppose it. Usually the way that this goes is that the amount of money that's spent, whichever has the most amount of money, that's usually the way the measure ends up going. So it looks like, you know, there's over $875,000 in kind contributions to support it. So this is probably going to pass. I mean, the voters have to vote for it, but it's probably going to pass. Wow, man. And there's a note here. Oh, thank you. And thank you for this, Roger. Minimum wage, $18 for California in 2026. I think you might already know where I'm going with this. Peep what is in the red circle, most expensive areas. Yeah, this is what people need to see. From the Outer Reach report for California, it says you need to make $47.38 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in California. Now, what's important to note is the most expensive areas in California, and that is Santa Cruz, Watsonville, San Francisco, San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, and Salinas. These are the most expensive areas. And when you break this down, it says in Santa Cruz, you need to make $77.96 an hour. Yo, California is insane. This is insane. Nobody can do this, man. Like San Francisco, $64, San Jose, $60, Santa Maria, $57, Salinas, $55. That's how much you need to make an hour in those most expensive areas in California to afford a 2-bedroom rental. That's insane. Now, every time I see Santa Clara, I think about the movie Lost Boys. Wasn't it Santa Clara? What was the name of the town in Lost Boys? What was the name of the town? What was the name of the town? You guys saw the movie Lost Boys with the vampires? It's a cult classic. Come on, guys. Lost Boys. I thought it was Santa Clara. Anyway, let me bring it up, Eric. You have to bring it up, or if you put it up here, I don't know. Yeah, I can't click on it. Oh, the map is under background. Let me see if I can try it again. I don't even see that anymore. It took me to something else. Oh, hold on. Yeah, there's no background, Roger. It just says the page that you're looking for doesn't exist. Then it says go to, or maybe I should go down. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't, oh, you got it. Okay, sorry. He said go to the bottom and he said there's a map. Oh, about the slavery thing. State constitutional provisions providing for slavery and or involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. So the teal color is involuntary servitude as criminal punishment, and yellow is slavery or involuntary servitude as criminal. Wow. That's crazy, dude. That's wild. That's wild. I don't know if your state's there, guys. We are going to finish the California ballot measures for November, and then we will head on out of here, folks. So I think we're moving into rent control. Yeah, there's a rent control measure for California. Let me get to Let's make sure I caught up to where I was last time. Okay, yeah. Last time we finished with the $18 minimum wage. So that'll be on the ballot. We covered that one. And now we're going to rent control. So if you live in California, listen up, fam. This is Proposition 33. Prohibit state limitations on local rent control initiative. A yes vote supports repealing the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, thereby allowing cities and counties to limit rent on any housing and limit the rent for first-time tenants, and adding language to state law to prohibit the state from limiting the right of any city, county, or city and county to maintain, enact, or expand residential rent control. Interesting. So how would this change state power over local rent control? So we already covered this here. This is like a repeat. I don't know why they repeat this sometimes, but they do. But it does say here, it says that this does not prohibit laws related to renters, such as the existing statewide limit on rent increases. So this is going to be on the ballot this November for California. And who supported this? Bernie Sanders, Tony Strickland, California Democratic Party, the Nurses Association. One of the organizations is Housing is a Human Right, supports this. And here's one of the arguments. Statewide rent control is a ludicrous idea, but the measure's language goes further. It gives local governments ironclad protections from the state housing policy and therefore overreaching enforcement. It's always interesting to me how people will just throw out that word ludicrous, like just because. Luda. All right. Californians for Responsible Housing. This is sponsored by the California Apartment Association, and No on 3 are leading the campaign in opposition to the initiative. So who is opposed? So it's Democrats versus Democrats, FYI. Tony Atkins and Buffy Wicks, who are both Democrats, oppose it. The Republican Party of California oppose it. So now see how you got Democrats joining with the Republican Party to oppose it? Unions, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America opposes this. And one of the organizations that oppose it is California Apartment Association. That's interesting. Here's one of the arguments. It says on paper, it would be legal to build new homes, but it would be illegal, largely speaking, to make money doing so. So here we go with the housing situation again, right? And I want to show you how much money has been spent for this measure, because this usually can give you an idea whether or not it's going to pass or not. So It appears there's been over 13.3 million spent to support this measure and over 2.2 million to oppose this measure. So that's interesting. We'll see if that passes in California. I know housing is a big issue in Cali. Quick note here from Roger, who helps me with these. He said, seeing who it is for and who it's against tells me everything I need to know. In California, approved measures take effect on the 5th day after the Secretary of State certifies election results, unless a different effective date is specified by the measure. Let's hope it gets approved, because seeing what the governor is doing, clear out them homeless in camps, it couldn't come at a sooner time. Hopefully, maybe this will stop the mass exodus. Yeah, you guys know there's a big housing problem in California. I mean, across the country, housing is an issue, but in California, it is probably, I think California has the largest homeless population. So big problem there. Let's see if that passes. Here's another one with healthcare. Proposition 34 requires certain participants in Medi-Cal RX program to spend 98% of revenues on patient care initiative. A yes vote supports requiring healthcare providers that spent over $100 million in any 10-year period on anything other than direct patient care and operated multifamily housing with over 500 high severity health and safety violations to spend 98% of revenues from the federal discount prescription drug program on direct patient care. It also penalizes violators of the initiative with loss of tax exempt status and licenses to operate health insurance plans, pharmacies, and clinics, and permanently authorizing Medi-Cal RX in state law. Interesting. So what would Proposition 34 do? And it's interesting here. It says it would establish a new category of entities called prescription drug price manipulators. If an entity is classified as a prescription drug price manipulator, the entity would have to meet the following requirements annually to maintain its tax exempt status and licensure as health insurance plans, pharmacies, and clinics. Spend at least 98% of revenues from federal discount prescription drug program on direct patient care and not engage in unprofessional conduct or conduct contrary to public health, welfare, or safety. So interesting. It says Gavin Newsom first established the Medi-Cal RX program in January of 2019 via executive order. So again, it goes to show you things that the governor can do via executive order. All right. So, and I want to jump forward here. So it says Protect Patients Now is sponsored by California Apartment Association and is leading the campaign in support of the initiative. Who supports this? State Assembly Member Evan Lowe. So we're seeing some bipartisanship here. The Republican Party of California supports it, and so does Democrat Assembly Member Evan Lowe. Interesting. Organizations, ALS Association and San Francisco Women's Cancer Network. And here's one of the arguments. The Protect Patients Now Act will force the worst abusers of the drug discount program, like Weinstein's AIDS Healthcare Foundation, back to the program's original mission to provide healthcare to low-income patients. This measure focuses only on the program's worst offenders, putting in place new accountability measures to ensure they are appropriately using taxpayer dollars. The act requires the program's worst offenders like AHF and any others like it to spend 98% of their taxpayer generated revenues on direct patient care. It also prevents them from overcharging government agencies for prescription drugs. So long as these worst offenders meet these requirements, they can continue their healthcare operations. Interesting. Who is opposing this? The AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Housing as a Human Right opposes it. And one of the arguments here, I want to read the one from Consumer Watchdog. The proposed initiative is poorly veiled attempt by California Apartment Association to silence a political adversary. If it is allowed to be put to the voters, no organization in the future will be safe from similar retribution by moneyed opponents. Let's see how much money is being spent to support or oppose. Over 11.7 million is spent to support this measure, and there's no money spent to oppose it. So I think you can kind of imagine where this is going to go. And what I mean by that, it means if they have more money to support or oppose, whichever has the most money, that means they can run more ads. They can, have more mailers go out to residents. So that's why I say usually whichever has the most money is usually the way that it goes. And I've talked about the Cali Medi-Cal RX program on here before, but I think this is important. It talks about what Gavin Newsom did. In 2019, he signed an executive order requiring the California Department of Health Care Services to transition Medi-Cal pharmacy services to managed care to fee for service. Managed care means the state pays a fee to a managed care plan for each enrollee, and the plan pays providers for the Medi-Cal services needed by the beneficiary included in the plan's contract. Fee for service means the state pays providers directly for Medi-Cal services needed by the beneficiary. DHCS had to request federal approval to transition from managed care to fee for service. The full transition took effect on January 1st, 2022. Here's a little note here from Roger. Seeing this makes me say this looks extremely complicated and just glazes over my eyes and makes me say just do CalCare, aka single payer universal health care, to make it easier. If Protect Patients Now and AIDS Healthcare Foundation can get this on the ballot, then they have the ability to get CalCare on the ballot. So it makes me wonder what is really going on. I get the feeling these orgs have turned to gatekeepers. So when it came to CalCare, they actually had the votes to, vote for that in the state legislature. But the problem was the big money. I don't know if Roger knows this, but big money interests, big pharma companies contacted them and said, don't bring it for a vote. But they had the votes to approve CalCare in California. And that would have been huge in this country. It would have been the first state to pass something like that, to pass single payer. But big pharma intervened. That's what happened with CalCare. Here's another one here, Proposition 35, Managed Care Organization Tax Authorization Initiative. Another one for healthcare. A yes vote supports permanently authorizing a tax on managed care organizations based on monthly enrollees, which is set to expire in 2026, and requiring revenues to be used to increase Medi-Cal programs. So these two are somewhat connected. Because I want to go through all this again, but because like I said, they're connected. But for this one, who is supporting it? Both parties, California Democratic Party and the Republican Party of California. The SEIU California State Council. Which organization? California Dental, Hospital, Medical, Primary Care Association, Planned Parenthood affiliates of California. And one of the arguments here, it is important to ensure that Californians have access to health care, which is exactly what this ballot measure will help ensure. This measure will help Planned Parenthood health centers and other community health centers invest in the workforce, expand services, and ultimately be able to serve more parents. Funding for Medi-Cal is critical for the millions of Californians who rely on the program for essential reproductive health care. So how much money is spent? 11.7 million to support. No money spent to oppose this measure. And yeah. So again, same note here from Roger. This would be so much simpler if they just had CalCare. Again, I told you, another example of putting a Band-Aid on something instead of healing the wound. Like, to me, it's ridiculous. Peep this one, fam. Proposition 36, Drug and Theft Crime Penalties and Treatment Mandated Felonies Initiative. Hold on to your seat for this one. A yes vote supports making changes to Proposition 47 approved in 2014, including classifying certain drug offenses as treatment mandated felonies, increasing penalties for certain drug crimes by increasing sentence length and level of crime, requiring courts to warn individuals convicted of distributing illegal drugs of their potential future criminal liability if they distribute deadly drugs like fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and increasing sentences for theft based on the value of the property that is stolen. Okay, so this one's interesting. Who supports this? Vince Fong, he's a Republican. San Francisco Mayor London Breed. We have San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria, San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan. So we have nonpartisan, then we have Republican. One of the candidates that supports it is George Whitesides. He's a Democrat running for U.S. House. Political parties, Republican Party of California. So again, we're seeing some more bipartisanship, and Target, Walgreens, and Walmart support it. And unions, California Police Chief, State Sheriff's Association, and one of the organizations, California Business Roundtable. Now, here's one of the arguments, and this is from San Francisco Mayor London Breed. The Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act will make targeted but impactful changes to our laws around fentanyl and help us tackle the chronic retail theft that hurts our retailers, our workers, and our cities. I fully support this measure, and I know it will make a meaningful difference for cities across California. Interesting. Who opposes it? California Democratic Party. And Anti-Decivism Coalition in California. Here's their argument. Prop 36 would reverse the state's gains in reducing the dangerous, racially unequal, and unconstitutionally crowded prison population. Second, it would dry up funding for much needed services, including employment assistance for those coming out of jail, victim services, and housing. Finally, it risks making California less safe, as programs funded by Proposition 47 have reduced recidivism without increasing violent crime. There's $7.1 million spent to support this, zero to oppose. Again, I look at all the money that's spent to support or oppose these ballot measures, and I think to myself, like, what if they took all that money and put that money into communities and build up those communities? Something to think about, right? So there's that as well. And here's a note here from Roger. It looks like the 1980s is trying to make a comeback in California. You got the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, Truth in American Government, contributing to this. Be easy, that dude. You see, this is why you don't vote the couch. See what they are trying to sneak past you guys when you're not looking. Vote the initiative, especially this one. This is targeting us. Feel free to leave everything else blank, but tell your boys, tell everybody in your neighborhood, tell the state, look how much money Walmart and Home Depot put into this. I know it has to do with the theft, but they're reacting. They don't know what else to do. I understand, but this isn't the way to do it. And this is something I will always say to people as well. Again, always support the ballot measures. It's incredibly important that you do, because I'm seeing them like these states are kind of sneaky, and sometimes they'll implement a ballot measure during a special election when most people do not participate, and they'll just sneak things by you that you may not even be paying attention to. So it's important that we are paying attention to these ballot measures. That's why, I cover them on this show. So you know what's going to be on the ballot in November, because they'll try to sneak anything. And Roger's right. They're reacting, So, yeah.